are the games industry, where programmers, artists, musicians, voice actors, and many more come together to create projects full of passion, innovative ideas, and engaging storylines which tug at the heartstrings. And also FIFA games. Hi, my name is Lawrence Muska. I'm a 3D environment artist and I'm looking to get a job in the games industry. For the uninitiated, if you've recently graduated, it basically means that it's really fucking hard. Most job descriptions state that they're looking for senior artists or artists that already have experience working on shipped AAA titles. I am neither of these things. This leaves me with one alternative: having an exceptional portfolio. You see, if you want to get a job as a 3D artist, it doesn't matter where you've studied or what kind of grades you got. It basically comes down to, does your work look good, and do you know how to put your art into a game without nuking the frames into a PowerPoint presentation? For this purpose, artists use portfolios, places where we can show off our projects. In my case, I use a website called ArtStation. But after sending the job applications to several studios and being rejected by their automatic messaging system, I have realized that I need to do more. I need to go bigger, I need to be flashier, I need to make a portfolio piece so mouth-wateringly appetizing that no game studio will ever think about rejecting me. So come with me and find out how I plan to break into a game studio, legally, by getting hired. Okay, so first we're going to have to, we could make a, what the fuck are we gonna make? Okay, this is the wrong approach. As a 3D artist, the best place to start is by gathering references, finding a nice concept art piece that we can translate into 3D. Now, it's always a good idea to go for something visually appealing, but most importantly, manageable. Hero props like weapons or antiques work fine, as well as small environments like house interiors or a town square. These are always a good choice. What you don't want to do is choose something so absurdly big, something you have to sink hundreds or even thousands of hours into to recreate. Oh my god. Look at that. It's massive scale, the Byzantine architecture. It looks like it's something ripped right out of Baldur's Gate 3. I couldn't possibly do this on my own in a reasonable amount of time. I'd need a team of people to pull this off. Now that we've chosen a reference for us to recreate, it's time to set up our camera's focal length. Focal length measures the distance from the optical center of your lens, where the light rays converge, to the sensor or film in your camera. In essence, this affects how zoomed in or out you are, how much of a fisheye lens effect you're getting. For this, I'm going to use a program called F-Spy. By lining up these vectors along the surfaces of my reference, it can calculate an approximate value of the focal length of the scene. This will help me when creating models for the scene, as their scale will be more true to life. This isn't always a surefire method, as you might find some inconsistencies in the perspective of some concept art. Now that we have an estimated focal length of the camera in this concept, we can create a camera in Maya and set out reference as a backdrop. This will allow me to watch as closely as possible my models are those of the reference image. Now, you probably think that we get to just jump in and start 3D modeling, right? Well, if I were to just start doing that, the workload of this project might just crush me into a fine red paste. Which is why I'm going to show you some tricks that environment artists use to lighten their workload. For this project, we're going to be relying on something called modularity, which is defined as the quality of consisting of separate parts that, when combined, form a complete whole. A system lacks modularity when a tweak to one of its components affects the functioning of others. Basically, this means that by separating our concept image into repeating identical pieces, we can use those same pieces over and over again to build our city much faster. This will help us avoid making the same roof piece 37 times. For those of you that used to play with and/or eat Lego when you were children, please contain your excitement. I will do the same. The red bricks were my favorite. As you can see by the several highlighted pieces on the reference image, there are several modules that can be identified here, from rooftops to railways and towers. Fantastic. We have successfully reduced the amount of hours required to complete this project from 8,000 down to 7,600. We can now begin blocking out our city. Now, I'm not starting by immediately modeling every single piece in detail. Instead, I'm just trying to get a feel for the city by using very basic geometric shapes. The goal of this is to understand two things mainly. The first being the scale of the objects that we will be creating, as well as understanding where these elements should be placed. Doing so will allow us to avoid creating an environment which is 50 kilometers wide and hundreds of thousands of meters tall. With the blockout, I realized that I had done just that, and I was able to pull back all of my models to a more reasonable size. Are you ready? It's finally time. That's right, Bozo. We've done all the planning. We've done all the prepping. It's now time for the main event. We're going to be doing some real 100% no clickbait 3D modeling. Let's get started. When I planned this video, I already knew that I would be starting by creating the architectural elements from my concept. For this, we're going to be doing hard surface modeling. This is exactly what it sounds like. Modeling things that are harder and more rigid. Things like vehicles and weapons are included in this category. Hard surface modeling is generally more straightforward to do than its counterpart, organic modeling, which can include characters and animals. These are usually created in different programs and are almost sculpted like clay statues. With hard surface modeling, I'll be sticking to manipulating basic geometric shapes, like cylinders and squares, to obtain the shapes that I want. The process for creating the models of the buildings is going to be mostly the same. I'll begin by either creating a cylinder or square, depending on whether I'm going to make some tower or wall. I then manipulate the geometry by using two main tools, inset and extruding. By insetting a face, I create a ring of edges around its interior, which I can then scale to my liking. While by extruding it, I can then move that face inwards or outwards from my original model. For the domed roofs of the towers, I can pretty much just create some spheres and cut them in half, while adjusting their size to my needs. Models in video games are constituted of polygons, a plane figure with at least 3 straight sides and angles, and typically 5 or more. However, it's best to just stick with 3-sided polygons, called trees, or 4-sided polygons called quads, as polygons with more sides, also known as n-gons, can cause issues when imported into game engines. The higher the number of polygons, the greater its resolution, and the greater a mesh's resolution, the more processing power your computer will require to load it. To avoid bloating my scene with unnecessary details, I'm careful to keep reducing the amount of polygons in models, while maintaining their silhouette. As I work, I begin a process called UV unwrapping. To properly apply a texture to a model, you basically need to cut seams along its edges so that you can unfold it as a flat surface. Once unraveled, the textures that are projected onto your flattened model are then also projected along your model proper. If you've seen other videos on YouTube about creating 3D characters, you might be familiar with a process known as texture baking. With this system, you package the UVs of your character into one or several UV tile sets, and then paint your textures on the model. However, since we're making an environment, we need to use a different approach, using something called tileable textures. This is because due to the size of the models used here, if we were to attempt to package our textures into UV sets, we'd end up with incredibly blurry and ugly textures. Tileable textures, on the other hand, repeat a pre-existing texture across our whole model, which is perfect for the stone, brick, and ceramic tiles present in the buildings here. This texture is scaled up and down according to the size of our UVs, so we won't have to worry about anything being blurry with this approach. To ensure that my model's textures maintain the same level of resolution, I need to maintain their UVs at the same scale. For this, I'll be using the textile density tool inside of Maya. In general, third-person games maintain a textile density of 5.12, so I'll stick to that as well. Also, I'll be using 4K texture maps for this project. Normally, in game studios, they'd use lower resolution maps, but since this is a portfolio piece, I want to be able to get the maximum level of quality possible when I finally render out my project. We now have our city modeled, and it's time for us to blow out my old NVIDIA 1080 and boot up Unreal Engine 5. First things first, I need to make a folder structure so that I don't have all of my files floating around in random places. Half the work of a 3D artist is being orderly so as to not cause any chaos for yourself or the people you're working with. As I import my models, I make sure to use the correct annotations for them. In this case, starting with the prefix SM or static mesh. Thankfully, apart from directly importing my 3D models, I can also import my camera from Maya, so I don't need to worry about camera matching from scratch in Unreal. For now, I'll just import my city as a single mesh as I want to see it in this program. The next episode, we'll be importing individual buildings and applying some new textures onto them as a first pass, as well as begin to set up the lighting for this scene. Well, I guess that's everything for me for now. If you'll excuse me, it's getting dark out, and I'm going to need to fight with the people with the computer science degree for the last bed in the homeless shelter. If you want to see more of how this project evolves, you might want to consider subscribing. Or, if you're feeling adventurous, I recommend gang stalking me so that you get to see the whole process firsthand. Until next time.